Have you ever wondered if the events we are experiencing today are an echo of the past? The New World Order may be repeating history before the second coming of Christ. Stay with us to find out how. The first event is the religious persecution. Before the first coming of Christ, God's followers faced intense persecution. Today, we are seeing an alarming increase in religious persecution around the world, reflecting ancient times and suggesting we are approaching the second coming of Christ. Before Christ, God's prophets faced great opposition and persecution. Jeremiah, for example, was imprisoned and thrown into a cistern for proclaiming God's truth. Daniel was thrown into the lion's den for his faith. These men of God stood firm in their faith even in the face of severe threats to their lives. After the coming of Christ, the early Christians also faced severe persecution. Stephen was stoned to death for his testimony of Jesus. Paul and the apostles were imprisoned, beaten, and in many cases martyred for proclaiming the gospel. Persecution was a constant effort to silence the message of Christ and destroy the Christian faith. Today, religious persecution is growing in intensity and scope. In many countries, Christians face discrimination, violence, and even death for their faith. In places like North Korea, Afghanistan, and Somalia, being a Christian can mean imprisonment, torture, or execution. Persecution also exists in more subtle ways in Western societies. Christians are ridiculed, marginalized, and pressured to compromise their beliefs. Legislation and policies that restrict religious freedom are becoming increasingly common. Many theorists suggest that the New World Order is behind this growing religious persecution. The idea is that a global government or powerful elite is seeking to eradicate all forms of religion, especially Christianity, to establish complete control over society. In Revelation 13 verses 15 to 17, we read about the beast that will cause everyone to worship its image, and those who refuse will be persecuted and killed. The second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. It is important to analyze current religious persecution with discernment. We must be aware of global events and policies that may affect religious freedom, but we must also seek the truth and not be swayed by unfounded theories. The Bible warns us that persecution is part of the Christian life and that we must be spiritually prepared to face it. We must also remember God's promises. In Matthew 5 verses 10 to 12, Jesus said, "Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." The second event are the political and social changes. Before the first coming of Christ, the world was in great political and social upheaval. Empires rose and fell, nations were in conflict, and society underwent drastic changes. Let's see how these past events compare to what we are experiencing today. Before the first coming of Christ, the Roman Empire was at the height of its power. Rome dominated much of the known world, imposing its laws, culture, and religion. However, this period of dominance was marked by constant conflicts, corruption, and an insatiable thirst for power. The prophets of the Old Testament frequently warned about the dangers of relying on human powers instead of trusting in God. In Daniel 2 verse 44, we read the prophecy about the fall of human empires. In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. This prophecy spoke of the establishment of God's kingdom, which would supersede all earthly empires. Today, we are seeing a repetition of this dynamic of political and social changes on a global scale. Globalization has interconnected nations like never before, creating a complex web of economic, political, and cultural dependencies. However, this interconnection has also brought tensions, inequalities, and conflicts. Moreover, we are witnessing the rise of authoritarian governments in various parts of the world. Leaders who centralize power, restrict freedoms, and impose strict controls over their populations. This scenario is disturbingly similar to the control the Roman Empire exercised over its territories. The New World Order is often mentioned as an influential force behind these global changes. Theorists suggest that there is a coordinated effort to create a single world government that can control all nations and peoples. This concept of a global order is not new, but modern technology and interconnectivity have made this idea more achievable than ever. In Revelation 13 verses 7-8, we find a description of a global power that will dominate all nations. It was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. And it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the Lamb's book of life, the Lamb who was slain from the creation of the world. Many believe this passage refers to the rise of a global government under the leadership of the Antichrist. When analyzing these political and social changes, it is crucial not to fall into sensationalism, but to seek discernment and truth. The Bible warns us about difficult times, but it also calls us to trust in God and remain firm in our faith. We must be aware of the changes around us and seek to understand how they fit into God's larger plan. This helps us not to be deceived by unfounded conspiracy theories, but to be spiritually prepared for the challenges that may arise. The third event are the natural disasters and signs in the heavens. Before the first coming of Christ, the world experienced various natural and celestial phenomena that were interpreted as divine signs. Today, we are seeing an intensification of these events, suggesting we are approaching the second coming of Christ. In the time before Christ's first coming, the scriptures record numerous natural disasters and signs in the heavens that were seen as portents of divine intervention. A notable example is the earthquake that occurred during the crucifixion of Jesus, recorded in Matthew 27 verse 51. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rocks split. Another example is the sun turning dark and the moon becoming like blood, mentioned in Joel 2 verse 31. The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. These events were seen as clear signs of the imminence of great spiritual and physical changes. Today, we are witnessing a growing frequency and intensity of natural disasters. Earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, wildfires, and pandemics are becoming increasingly common and devastating. Additionally, celestial phenomena like eclipses, meteor showers, and planetary alignments have captured the world's attention. In Luke 21 verse 11, Jesus said, "There will be great earthquakes, famines, and pestilences in various places, and fearful events and great signs from heaven." These words seem to accurately describe the events we are currently experiencing. Theories suggest that the New World Order is using these natural disasters and signs in the heavens to promote a global agenda of control and fear. The idea is that extreme weather events and pandemics are manipulated or exaggerated to justify draconian measures, reduce individual freedoms, and centralize power. In Revelation 6 verses 12-14, we read about the catastrophic events that accompany the opening of the sixth seal. I watched as he opened the sixth seal. There was a great earthquake. The sun turned black like sackcloth made of goat hair. The whole moon turned blood red, and the stars in the sky fell to earth, as figs drop from a fig tree when shaken by a strong wind. The heavens receded like a scroll being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. The natural disasters and signs in the heavens we are witnessing today reflect the events described in the scriptures before the first coming of Christ. The New World Order may be using these events to advance its agenda, but as Christians, we must trust in God's sovereignty and be spiritually prepared for the challenges to come. The fourth event are the divine guidance and direction in times of crisis. Before the first coming of Christ, God gave specific guidance to his people to navigate through crises and challenges. Today, we are seeing an increase in the search for divine guidance as we face global crises and uncertainties, suggesting that God continues to guide his people in preparation for the second coming of Christ. Before the first coming of Christ, God frequently gave specific guidance to his people in times of crisis. A notable example is the story of Joseph, who received instructions from God in dreams to prepare Egypt for 7 years of famine. Joseph's wisdom and preparation saved not only Egypt but also many other nations. Another example is the prophet Elijah, who during a severe drought and famine received divine direction to hide by the Korath ravine, where he was fed by ravens. God provided specific guidance to protect and sustain his servants in times of need. Today, many Christians are intensely seeking divine direction amidst global crises, such as pandemics, economic crises, and political tensions. This search reflects the human need for guidance and security in times of uncertainty. Modern technology has facilitated access to sermons, Bible studies, and devotionals that help Christians seek and discern God's will. Additionally, many have reported personal experiences of divine direction through dreams, visions, and prophetic words. The New World Order, with its agendas of control and centralization of power, can be seen as a force that creates and exacerbates global crises. Amidst these crises, the need for divine direction becomes even more crucial. Many believe that God is using these difficult times to awaken his people and guide them through the storms. In Revelation 12 verse 6, we see an example of divine protection and provision. The woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. This verse symbolizes divine protection and direction during periods of great tribulation. While seeking divine direction, it is important to distinguish between true guidance from God and the many voices that can lead us astray. The Bible exhorts us in Proverbs 3 verses 5 to 6, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." The search for divine guidance and direction in times of crisis reflects what happened before the first coming of Christ. The New World Order may be creating an environment of uncertainty and crisis, but as Christians, we must trust in God's sovereignty and seek his guidance in all aspects of our lives. The fifth event are the increase in apostasy and false prophets. Before the first coming of Christ, there was a significant increase in apostasy and the proliferation of false prophets. Today, we are witnessing a repetition of these events, suggesting we are approaching the second coming of Christ. In the times before the first coming of Christ, apostasy, the abandonment of the true faith, was a serious problem. Often, the people of Israel turned away from God and followed other gods, resulting in severe consequences. In Jeremiah 2 verse 13, God said, "My people have committed 2 sins. They have forsaken me, the spring of living water, and have dug their own cisterns, broken cisterns that cannot hold water." Additionally, false prophets were common, deceiving people with lies and false promises. In Jeremiah 14 verse 14, the Lord said, "The prophets are prophesying lies in my name. I have not sent them or appointed them or spoken to them. They are prophesying to you false visions, divinations, idolatries, and the delusions of their own minds. Today, we are seeing an alarming increase in apostasy and the proliferation of false prophets. Many people are turning away from biblical truths, adopting beliefs and practices that contradict the teachings of Christ. Modern society, with its moral relativism and growing secularism, contributes to this trend. False prophets and spiritual leaders promoting deceptive doctrines are also more prevalent. In Matthew 24 verse 11, Jesus warned, "And many false prophets will appear and deceive many people." These false teachers often take advantage of people's lack of biblical knowledge and vulnerability, leading them down paths that stray from God's truth. The New World Order, with its ideologies and global agendas, may be playing a significant role in the increase of apostasy and the proliferation of false prophets. The promotion of a unified belief system and pressure for conformity may be undermining authentic Christian faith. In 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 3, Paul writes, "Don't let anyone deceive you in any way, for that day will not come until the rebellion occurs and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the man doomed to destruction." This verse suggests that apostasy will be a sign of the end times, paving the way for the Antichrist. As we face the increase in apostasy and false prophets, it is crucial for Christians to remain firm in their faith and knowledge of the Scriptures. In 2 Timothy 4 verses 3-4, Paul warns, "For the time will come when people will not put up with sound doctrine. Instead, to suit their own desires, they will gather around them a great number of teachers to say what their itching ears want to hear. They will turn their ears away from the truth and turn aside to myths." We must always be vigilant, test the spirits, and seek discernment through prayer and study of God's Word. The faith community also plays a vital role, providing support, correction, and encouragement. The increase in apostasy and the proliferation of false prophets we are witnessing today reflect the times before the first coming of Christ. The New World Order may be contributing to these phenomena, promoting ideologies that undermine Christian faith. The sixth event are the rise of the Antichrist and the implementation of global control systems. Before the first coming of Christ, various tyrannical leaders attempted to establish absolute dominance. Today, we are seeing the rise of global control systems that many believe are paving the way for the coming of the Antichrist. Before the first coming of Christ, the world saw the rise of tyrannical leaders who sought to control vast populations. A notable example is King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, who established a vast empire and demanded exclusive worship. Another example is the Empire of Alexander the Great, who conquered large territories and imposed his culture and religion. These leaders represented absolute control, using military force, propaganda, and religion to consolidate their power. They established governance systems that centralized power in a single figure or ruling class. Today, we are witnessing the emergence of technologies and policies that enable unprecedented control over individuals and societies. Digital surveillance, data monitoring, and facial recognition technologies are becoming commonplace, allowing governments and corporations to track and control people's actions. Additionally, there is a growing movement toward global governance, with international organizations gaining more power and influence. Economic globalization and political interdependence are creating a scenario where important decisions are made by entities that transcend national borders. The New World Order is often associated with the creation of a single world government that could be used by the Antichrist to exert absolute control over humanity. In Revelation 13 verses 16-17, we read about an economic control system that will be imposed. It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. This global control system is being facilitated by modern technologies and power-centralizing policies. Many theorists suggest that the New World Order is behind the implementation of these technologies and policies, preparing the ground for the rise of the Antichrist. We must also remember that the Bible warns us about the coming of the Antichrist and the control systems he will establish. In 2 Thessalonians 2 verses 3-4, Paul writes, "Don't let anyone deceive you in any way, for that day will not come until the rebellion occurs and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the man doomed to destruction. He will oppose and will exalt himself over everything that is called God or is worshipped, so that he sets himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God." The events are repeating, but are you prepared? The New World Order may be a sign of the times, but our hope is in Christ. Leave in the comments what you think about these connections and subscribe for more revelations about the end times.